So first and foremost, thank you everybody for being here and spending the next hour with Asif and myself. We're very passionate and excited about this idea of driving not only adoption, but sustainable adoption. So what we're going to do in the next hour is we'll share the things we've been working on how you could drive sustainable adoption and the 5 steps you can do. Just to get a conversation going, just want to make sure y'all know what we've done, what we've been doing in the past in case we haven't met before. So Asif, why don't you introduce yourself?
You got it. So I'm a SharePoint guy, basically. I have been a SharePoint guy since 2002, back when I was thrown into it, basically. I don't want to go too deep into my introduction, but on the surface, what I do right now, I'm a trainer, consultant, and a basically all-around SharePoint guy for all different things. Love SharePoint. I think it's got its pros and cons, but being able to tell folks what you can do and what you should do is what I try to specialize in. And adoption, to me, is a key for what we do because, and I'll share some stories a little bit later as well from my experience, but if you don't have adoption, you don't have SharePoint. There's no point on having your good-looking portal to do whatever. And of course, yeah, people can see what it's written on. I'm not going to all that stuff.
So good. Well, thank you, Asif, for that quick background. As for me, just like Asif, I've been working with this technology for a while now. In fact, I started back in 2000. Help organizations not only take advantage of SharePoint as a tool, but really gain business value out of it. I'm a managing partner with Innovative E. We're based out of DC and Atlanta, and we work with mid to large organizations driving business value. And one of the ways to do this is really to get sustainable adoption. I wrote the book SharePoint for Project Management. This was the very first business focus book around SharePoint as well. And what gets me excited is really this idea of being able to work better, be more efficient, and SharePoint can certainly do that. But on the flip side, as we all know, we've been there, we heard stories where SharePoint is nothing but a big file share. And hopefully in the next hour with some of the ideas Asif and I talk about can help you shift that perspective and give you a clear direction on how to move forward and really grow the maturation of SharePoint usage in your organization. So let's get the conversation started here. As we've said, SharePoint has been around for a while. And one of the interesting things we're finding, in fact, SharePoint is about 12 years old now. 80% of SharePoint usage in organizations around the world is nothing but a big file share. Just kind of like this picture, right? I have kids. Asif, I'm sure you relate to this. My daughter's almost 3, and one thing that disappoints me is when I buy her a new toy, I give it to her. She doesn't read the instruction manual. She just breaks it open, starts playing with it, and then 10 minutes later, she gets frustrated. Why won't this fit? Have you experienced that with your kids?
Oh, that and more. Sometimes they play with the box and forget the toy. Seriously.
So isn't that so true, though, with SharePoint in the enterprise today, right? Where it's a typical IT, what I've seen, it's IT-driven. We'll build this nice SharePoint farm, 2 web front ends, all these nice database back end. Ooh, okay, we need to figure out how our users are going to use this. I know, we'll just throw it out there and tell them to have fun.
Don't you love that question? I'm sorry, Doug. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's like that question that comes many times, like, what does SharePoint do? What is SharePoint? Such a hard question to answer. Same thing over here. It's like, what does this do?
Yeah, and then what ends up happening is, well, it's kind of like collaboration, document management, but what ends up happening is users do what they know, right? Oh, it's a file share. Let's take all the files, stick it there, and then we can use it as a file repository, which is okay. However, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And the reason why, if you're thinking, this is a 12-year-old product and there's training out there, but it's still not sticking. How come it doesn't work? Why doesn't it fit? Because what we've seen, and I'm sure you've experienced, training is important. Don't get me wrong. However, a lot of the approach out there is the training that we see is very technology focused, right? Oh, you need to take a power user training, end user training, site manager training. But what ends up happening, especially at the masses, the end user, the business user level, it's not as effective. I'm sure, Asif, you've done a lot of training, and you still do Have you seen any of these issues, or have you heard a lot of these issues as you talk to, especially the end user level?
All of it. Everybody has a different style. They're all looking for how is this making my job better and not giving me more work, basically. Some people are just
Right.
afraid of adapting new technology or just don't want to do it. No,
And
that's always the case.
And typically, again, technology training is important. Learning the functionality of SharePoint is critical. However, what we've seen is organizations look at adoption and equate it to training. Adoption equals training. Well, no. Training is just a part of it. And then the second point is there's a lot of drive for organizations to provide the initial training. So let's say, oh, we have a brand new rollout or we have an upgrade. Let's roll out training.
Yep.
But then past that, what, right? And as we know, while we would love when people walk away from training that they'll be drinking the SharePoint Kool-Aid, life would be great, but that's not the case. So what we want to propose, Asif and myself, is we want to propose something else, right? And it's a shift in the view around adoption. What we want to propose is talk about this concept around sustainable adoption, and that's something we would like all of you to walk away with. If you forget everything, what I want you to remember in this 1-hour session is the 2 words, sustainable adoption. And the idea around sustainable adoption, especially around SharePoint, is really to meet these 3 goals. Number 1 is to drive excitement, because unlike other technologies before, be it Office or email, SharePoint not only works from a technical perspective, but it touches the business. And when we talk about touches the business, you got to figure out how you could drive excitement. How can you drive and make that light bulb click from an end user level? So that's the first piece around sustainable adoption. The second piece, I know Asif, you and I talked a lot about this idea of being able to facilitate change. Can you talk more about that?
Well, that's the hardest piece, right? Making change. There's like books written on facilitating change and then not having people be afraid of change. Change has got to be for the better. It cannot be change for the sake of change. Let's do something because it's shiny. And that's where I think
Exactly.
a lot of companies fall into this pit of, oh, we're going to change this, we're going to excite new people. No. That's not really exciting. It's got to have a tangible benefit for those folks. Otherwise, it's just change for the sake of change.
Yeah, you hit on a very good point. I'm working with an organization now where we're helping drive sustainable adoption, and they've had SharePoint for a long time. And then when I was interviewing some of the key business people, they're like, yeah, we got site manager training, we've got end user training, but I don't see how it's going to help me. But the key is, though, you're right. Not only do we get people excited, there needs to be tangible results, and this changes. It's across the board. I get my job done sooner, faster, better. I'm more effective in my work, but at the end of the day, it's looking at change towards the better, and then it's more the people in the process part. Last but not the least, the goal around sustainable adoption is not only get people excited, facilitating change for the better, but empowering them not only to use SharePoint for a given point in time, but to grow themselves so they can learn by themselves and learn amongst their peers and assist them. We want to break away from the traditional mold that the business user, if they get stuck, they're always going to call IT for help, because that defeats the purpose. One of the challenges, as we all know, is IT is not going to grow. So we have to put together a model, a structure, so not only can they get excited, they'll get their job done faster, better, sooner, but also they can help themselves and help their peers. And with these 3 tenets of sustainable adoption, is Asif and I and both our companies teamed up together with a program called Sustainable SharePoint Adoption Foundation. It's really marrying key things we do and putting together as a solution for customers. And really, we'll talk more about this, but the idea is get adoption quickly, rapidly, combined with looking at how we can effectively teach people the value of SharePoint, but more importantly, drive the idea of change. And it consists of 3 things, primarily. A facilitated one-day workshop, which I'll facilitate. It could be on-site or remote. And as a result of that workshop, you will get a sustainable adoption plan and roadmap so you can go and do it for your organization. And then to keep that going, we talk about the empowering and assisting. Asif's put together a special version of of the tool that his company has called Visual SP, and we'll get to see this in a second. But what we found is just by putting together as a solution like this can get organizations going with their sustainable adoption program quickly. So with that, we want to go through the 5 steps that we've used and we've seen effective on how you can drive sustainable adoption. In fact, it's these five tenets or 5 steps that we use to put together a sustainable SharePoint adoption foundation program. So the first step is at the highest level, you want to drive enterprise momentum. And what we mean by that is we got to bring it up to the decision maker level. And these typically are your executive, in fact, that decided, hey, we want SharePoint. Or more importantly, at the department level, your department managers or decision makers. Because the key to make sustainable adoption work is we got to get buy-in from them. And almost always we find that the highest level folks, and no offense meant, they don't really grasp the understanding what the benefit that things like SharePoint Enterprise Social can bring to the organization. So it's our job, it's our responsibility to raise this kind of engagement. I'm sure, Asif, you've seen this a lot too at the highest levels. Do you have thoughts about this?
So here's a usual scenario that I've seen so many times. A person, executive, goes to a conference, they see this new shiny object, or maybe they get some more familiar with what they already knew about SharePoint. Oh wow, it can have my Excel documents on the web, serve everything up from there. That's great. I can do this workflow, and they get excited. They come back and say, "Here's what we're doing. We are going with SharePoint." And then what happens is like they kind of pull out. They say, "Oh well, this is an IT job. IT needs to man it. They need to go ahead and support it and everything else," and then it doesn't really go anywhere, unfortunately. If the IT or the business users, or both actually, if they are partnering up with that executive and other executives to make them a true stakeholder to drive all the way from installation to launch to adoption and sustainable adoption throughout, then and only then this works. Otherwise, if the executive stops, it always falls apart.
So some of you may be thinking, okay, Dux, I get it. Executives has to get a good understanding, but how do you do this, right? So give me an example. So one of the key things that has to drive home with decision makers is if they make this SharePoint investment, well, the message you want to extend is, look, this is strategic. We're in this for the long term. And it's not just a one-trick pony. First of all, while a lot of organizations initially use SharePoint as a platform for your intranet, which is fine, but certainly you can grow and take advantage of this too for project management, HR, corporate communications, etc. But also, it's important that we convey the information that while SharePoint is great for these little applications that we can have within our organization, because traditionally we have to buy separate products for those things, so from a cost perspective, there's that value already. But more importantly, it's integration with existing tools people already use. And it doesn't even have to be a Microsoft-based tool. Okay? So I'm going to show you a quick example of what I'm talking about and typically how I showcase SharePoint as a business platform. So I'm going to bring up my 2 things. I'm going to show you a couple of things here. So I got my office reminder. So Asif, do you see this browser I have?
I see it.
Okay, so everybody, this is my company's website, and this is in fact on SharePoint 2010 right now. Obviously, we custom branded it because it's a public-facing site. Now, the reason why we did this is just like any other company. One of our pain points before is our public website getting updated. We're only so big, and we had that traditional webmaster model. But that's too much because every time we need our website updated, we got to contact our webmaster. So what we wanted is we want content owners to take care of their own content. And one of the other things we wanted is a lot of the content we wanted is in our intranet. So wouldn't it be great, right? Wouldn't it be great, so let me come back here, if our intranet information that needs to be on our public-facing site, for example, as soon as it's entered, it's going to show up there? Well, that's exactly what we did. And boy, talk about value and a time to market. So now I'm going to show you a quick example. So the example I'm going to show you is our events list. So on our public-facing site, notice that the webinar for today is on our public-facing site. So when I click on it, it brings up the event. So it looks like any other web page. But let me show you how all this behaves. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my Windows environment, and let me go to my intranet. And again, all I'm showing here is out-of-the-box SharePoint, nothing out of the ordinary here. So I'm going to go to, so I've logged in. As you see, this should look like home and should look familiar. And so let me go to my calendar list. So this is all out of the box. So we got a bunch of stuff that's going on, but I want to highlight this specific event, this 5 steps to drive sustainable SharePoint adoption. So how this works is one of my colleagues, Pamela, she would enter this in our internal SharePoint calendar list. Again, it's out of the box. The only difference here is we created some custom columns to tag the event so that once it's tagged accordingly, if it's an event, a training, it's going to show up on the right place. So we've already put rules that on our public-facing site, anytime there's a public event, like in a category called event, it's going to show up on our public-facing site. So that's cool, right? So now you enter it in our intranet. Not only does it show up in the intranet, it shows up on our public-facing site as well. But here's something even better. One of the things we don't really look at and talk about is the integration with SharePoint and Office, which people use day in, day out. So again, going back to my colleague Pamela, she lives in Outlook. And, you know, she just, if she could do everything in Outlook, she would. So what she does is a lot of these lists she could connect to Outlook. Just like this calendar, she connected to Outlook. And when she did that, let me hide. Okay, so let me log in. It's authenticating me real quick. Let me hide my personal calendar because what I want to show you is, notice that same entry in my calendar list is now in my copy of Outlook. So I'm going to update this quickly here. So 5 steps instead of number 5, I'm going to change it to the word 5. And I'm going to hit save. Think about what I just did here. I updated a calendar entry in Outlook, which, by the way, is a SharePoint calendar in my intranet, which, by the way, is being surfaced in our public-facing site. So what did I just do, right? Not only did I update the same piece of information in Outlook, I've also updated that information, which is in our internal calendar in SharePoint, which, by the way, is being displayed on the public-facing site. So when I hit refresh, voila, that's been updated. You talk about the power of this as a business platform. And I got to do it in Outlook. Could you imagine a day would come that you update a website with Outlook?
And that's the main thing, right? People are trying, I'm sorry to say, but I've seen this a lot, that folks try to get users out of their comfort zone, saying, you know what, try this thing, go here. We don't have to. We don't have to do that. Outlook is, like you said, it's a prime example of there's great integration in Outlook, great integration just like that with Word as well, with metadata that you can interface. There's things like that everywhere. Why not take their comfort zone, take their style, understand their style, and then give them doors from there to update their SharePoint information?
Absolutely. And don't get us wrong. We're not saying Outlook can do everything. But what we found with sustainable adoption, and to make people change, we talk about change, we always have to start with the lowest hanging fruit. What are people comfortable with, right? And whether we like it or not, Outlook, Excel, and Word, those are the killer applications in the enterprise today. If we use those as an entry point to SharePoint, especially as you talk to business executives, that's powerful because, number one, it's a low risk. It's not like we're telling executives, oh, we got to hook up SharePoint with CRM, SAP, because that's a big project. That's a lot of work. But once you start pitching the value at the day-to-day business pain points level initially, to them, oh, wow, that's cool. I don't have to email this stuff all over the place. I don't need to update 10 things of the same information. And it's not like I need to buy or do a lot of these integration. It's a quick win. But then the point is, once you do that quick win, you continue to grow and build upon it. So really talk about the business value. Right there's a business value, what I just did, right? You save time, one source of truth. And again, you're taking advantage of existing investment you already have in your tools that you already have, which is all Microsoft-based. So that's the first step. You got to get enterprise momentum at the decision maker at the business level. The second step is you have to align your business needs. So once you get the check writers, the decision makers on board on, wow, this is indeed a platform, you have to come down at a more tactical level now. Okay, what business needs do we need to address first? What business needs do we need to address second? Again, the key here is you need to identify business solutions. We don't want to strut around and showcase features, and that's what we do, unfortunately. Hey, look at this nice, shiny SharePoint 2013. It has news feeds, it has wikis, it has community, it has all these bells and whistles. And then what happens? 10 minutes later, they're looking at this. Yeah, it looks great, but I don't have time for this. I just learned how to ride a bike yesterday using Excel and email. I'm just going to leave this in the garage, dump a bunch of files in there, and I'm just going to ride my bike to work because I know that works.
So, Dux, I got a quick story about this, true story. This was with SharePoint 2003, but the exact same scenario I still see happening again and again and again, and now we're in SharePoint 2013. A university, I won't name exactly which one, but we did a project for university where we installed, made everything look great to their specification, everything. I mean, this was back in the early days, right? And everything was running fine. Search analytics were coming in. A couple of months down the line, they looked at what people are searching for. The top thing that people were searching for was not on their intranet. Now, I have not told this story to you before, I think, Doug, so I'm going to have you guess. What do you think that was that top thing at that university people were searching for?
Top thing, class schedules?
Good guess, but no. It was actually cafeteria menu. Something that was readily available before on the intranet. They went to SharePoint, and somebody thought that this was not important. Why put this cafeteria menu on our SharePoint site? It doesn't make any sense. Well, it does make sense to the users. You got to provide the users what they need. Otherwise, they're going to go back to look for that intranet or some other place. You don't want them to go back.
And you raise a good point, right? Because what typically happens? Typically, IT, again, puts out this nice, shiny object. Oh, we got to have this. It has to be nicely branded. But what's missing there is up front, the moment they thought about putting this in place or the upgrade, they never really talk about what the business needs are, never align with the users, what's more important to them versus what IT thinks more important to them.
Exactly.
And another example I have around that is in a lot of customers we work with, when we help prioritize and rank business needs, in some cases, or early on, I thought, wow, this sounds humorous. But one of the big things is a conference room scheduling system, where it's a big pain point for a lot of companies, especially executive admins, where people come to me and ask which conference room is available. But all we did is we would create an automated solution, a SharePoint site with a couple of calendars for each conference room and put some workflow in there, and now it's a self-service conference room scheduling system. Boy, they love that. And really, when we talk about aligning business needs, is right from the get-go, we got to identify business needs. And again, when we talk about business needs, I'm not saying thinking of big things, and that's what we typically do as IT, and I'm guilty of this back in the day. We got to go and sit down and look at just day-to-day things that people are having heartburn with, and we could deal with the big stuff later. We got to look at how do people work, right? One of the key considerations is think about the culture, and you don't expect people using Excel and email and network share to jump and start using the record center and dashboarding and a lot of the fancy things that SharePoint provides. You got to take business steps.
Very true. There's a figure very widely known, actually. I'm not sure if many people know about this in this webinar, but there's something called a 9x or 9 times effect. Basically, a new product or a new something that you introduce has to offer a 9 times improvement over the existing solution for people to immediately or easily adopt it. That's a pretty big leap, and you can only do that, just like you said, if it's not hurting me, I don't really care. I can do it the old way, but if something is hurting me, I need to have a pain point. You solve my pain point, it is much, much, much better, 9 times or more better. I'm definitely going to go with it, and that's where their entry point is to getting into this SharePoint world and adapting it.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Asif. So in the early example, I talk about our public-facing site. We actually measured how much time, so we can quantitatively measure it, of just updating the events on the website. Mm-hmm. Boy, way back when it's on the internet and we have to manually put it in our calendars and somebody has to put it on our public website. That takes time and effort, so that's one. But qualitatively, I mean, there were times that information wasn't quickly posted on our website that cost us business, right? So there's both of those aspects that we can consider, and certainly there's tens and thousands of examples we can look at.
Exactly.
The other reality too is I recognize that once you look at the business pain points, how we can help the organization, we can't do it all. And to really drive sustainable adoption is we have to prioritize, we have to pick the battle we want to fight, right? So how do you do this? How do you prioritize? So part of the process, so let me show you another example. I'm going to bring up my infamous Excel spreadsheet. Some of you have seen this already. But as a part of this exercise, when we want to drive sustainable adoption, is we look at the different groups. So it can apply to one department or even the whole company. So this is an example. We're looking at a company of 8,000 people. And we're trying to figure out what are the key pain points of these different groups, because to drive adoption, we want to hit on these pain points first, right? So I met with the groups in operations, HR, finance, and I spent maybe 30 minutes, an hour with them. I said, hey, look, what are your most common business pain points? And kind of explain where I'm going with this. Oh, Dux, we got this thing called SOP creation. You know, the way we do this now is somebody has to go to the network share, grab that file, fill out that Excel sheet, email it around, blah, blah, blah. So as they're explaining and defining that business process and what they have to do, in column C, I kind of document out-of-the-box SharePoint capabilities. Notice I have a drop-down that can support and make that process better. You know, we talk about facilitating change, so this is how SharePoint can improve it. So they go on a lot of different pain points: departmental orders, performance eval, accident report reviews. And once this session is done, towards the end I ask, if there's one thing we can solve for you, what would that be? HR may say, oh, Dux, this whole onboarding process we have is so manual. If we can automate that just a bit and improve that, you know, boy, that's a lot of great productivity improvement and cost savings, blah, blah, blah. So they rank their business needs. They would tell me what's important to them, more important to them, and second most important to them. And that's important because every group is different. And even myself as a consultant or even IT, I won't know their business better than they do, right? So after they describe their business pain points and what SharePoint capability can address, I want to measure now the value of those capabilities. And this is one of those things that we don't do. As a part of sustainable adoption, we have to look at the technical side to see what features can drive adoption better and what features maybe we don't use early on. So for HR, based on all their business needs, they would need lists, libraries, alerts, discussion boards, etc. Operations, these are the things they would need. And then on column C, we measure how important those are to the business. 5, it's very important. What's the size and effort to build all those lists for HR? 2, what does 2 mean? So I have some level of standardization based on my team skill set. 2 might mean 3-person weeks, so there's a certain value. What's the business impact? 3 is a high business impact because by doing this, we're going to reduce the number of people hanging out the hallway, which can cause that much money, right? Because the problem in this company is their onboarding is so manual. Sometimes when they hire somebody new, the person shows up, but then IT forgot to provision a login, or there's no office space provision. So that person just hangs out the hallway for a couple of days. That costs money, time, and effort, right? And having an automated system can reduce that. How reusable are these lists for HR? It's very reusable, meaning we can templatize it, we can use it yearly or something. Now what's the total business value? Why it's important to measure the business value of a specific feature for a specific department. So now we can go back and say, well, based on their business pain points and based on these features, these are the business value, and now we can rank and measure what we should do first, do next, and do third. And hence this is the 1, 2, 3. Because we also have to look at how much IT can do and cannot do. So we measure, you know, how much time would IT need to implement all these lists for HR, because IT might have to configure certain settings or create new accounts. What about support? What about training, right? So it's a total impact to IT of 3. 3 might mean a full-time resource for a couple of months or or so much time for existing resource. So now you can negotiate and balance and see how much you can do and cannot do. So based on that conversation that we facilitate, now we have a roadmap, say phase 1 we're going to do this, phase 2, phase 3. So this will help draw the sustainable adoption roadmap out. And boy, this is so powerful because now when somebody comes and say, hey, I want you to make SharePoint not look like SharePoint, which we always get, you can always go back and say, okay, what business need are you trying to address, right? So the idea of sustainable adoption is really looking at addressing key business needs. Asif, I know you had a couple other thoughts around that too.
Yeah, and fun and food always are a good idea. So as you were talking, I was thinking about a couple of things that I've heard before and that I've seen in companies. Taking events, taking occasions, taking different seasonal changes, and taking advantage of that to relaunch things, to relaunch aspects of your portal which are not getting enough attention, for example. And I'll give you a few examples that I've heard. For example, food events. That one thing could be SharePoint giving at Thanksgiving time. Give thanks for document workflow. Collaboration. So Booration, of course, BOO for Halloween. SharePoint Toberfest. That kind of stuff. Just re-engaging people is huge. You got to re-energize, re-engage, and also find those evangelists who do cater to these things quite a bit. Let them be your right arm to do that. And that's extremely important to all these things, I think, and more.
And clearly what you're alluding to, Asif, is IT can't do it by themselves.
Exactly.
Right?
That's a way to fail, for sure, if you just have IT do everything.
One thing we found is engaging key groups like corporate communications and HR. Those are very, very important to drive sustainable adoption. The third step is, so we said the first step, okay, you got to get the decision makers on board. The second step is you got to align business needs and prioritize what business needs you want to hit on for a specific group and address it. The third step now is you need to develop your sustainable adoption plan. First things first, you got to do an inventory of existing SharePoint resources you have. So a lot of you already have some kind of training, governance plan, user management plan. You look at all these things, and then number one, look at, okay, do we need to tweak any of these? Number two is, how do we tie all these together from a sustainable adoption perspective, right? Because one of the things we find a lot in organization is, you go there, it's a wild, wild west, permissions up the wazoo, and then IT says, we got governance. We tell people we have a governance plan. Yeah, but do people know it? No, not really, because everything's disjointed, right? Training is one thing, governance is another thing, support's another thing. There's no clear tie-in between these things, at least at the user level, and what all that means. So you got to look at all these things and then build your sustainable adoption plan with it. And that's one of the things we do as part of the SSAF program, is as we help build a roadmap, we can have guidance on how you tie all these together. And part of developing a plan is identifying your champions as well. And these are not necessarily your site managers or site admins, but these can be influential people in the organization that will help evangelize. So a couple of groups like project managers, those are one of the great prospects who can take advantage of SharePoint and really go run with it. Second, your executive admins, because typically they're the gatekeepers and they do a lot of manual stuff. If you can improve their manual activities and automate some of it, boy, they would be great champions for you. The other aspect of developing a sustainable adoption plan is establish a support model that's not just reliant on IT. And later on you'll see more of how you could do this. But at the very least, have a tiered support model. Number one is where a self-service support, where people can help themselves. For example, they get stuck on SharePoint or they want to learn how to do certain things. I've seen a lot of organizations having a FAQ-based site. Some organizations having, like a center of excellence kind of thing. While all that's great, one thing again that I find, especially in large organizations, is a lot of times people don't know where those things are. So what's key is it has to be contextual, and that's one thing I love about Visual SP, is that it makes it contextual. In fact, Asif, maybe this is a good time to show an example of what we've got as a part of Sustainable SharePoint Adoption Foundation.
Yeah,
So
we can
take over the
definitely do that.
screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Let me go ahead and switch it to my screen here. Hang on a second. All right, let me know when you can see my screen.
Let's see. Yep, I see your
Yeah.
screen. It's black and white though. Oh, now it's colored. Okay.
Yeah, and the resolution might not be perfect, but I just want to give everybody an example, right? So, something that we heard about for years, and finally about a year ago, we went ahead and, well, I should say a couple of years ago is when we started thinking about building it, architecting and everything else, and 1 year ago is when we launched it, Visual SP, basically giving you a help tab to provide in-context, on-demand help to SharePoint users, any kind of users, and extremely context-specific. Currently, I'm looking at a page, for example, so the help information here shows me page info document, which is actually leading to a Word document, linking to other site content. When I click on this thing, a video comes up. Right, in this video, there's audio too, but you can't hear it right now. It shows exactly what they need to know, right, to make changes, to link to other site content. You can also pop this thing out. When you pop it out, of course, and you can have a side-by-side. You can watch it. Somebody can watch it and actually do what they need to do as well. And then aside from the videos, which we provide lots of videos, you also have reference sheets, so like this one. And, of course, this is all plain vanilla out-of-the-box stuff. If you want specific things, you can go ahead and create that yourself as well and just plug it into the product. So providing documents or images and or videos directly to them at their fingertips is what this platform does. If I go to calendar list, here's help calendar list, very different than what you saw at the other one, right? Okay, I'm not sure there is
Yes.
a calendar.
So one of the things why I love this platform and I highly recommend this for organizations I work with is not only it comes with a lot of the out-of-the-box things, but like Asif says, you could put your organizational specific information like checklists, processes, guides, and as a part of sustainable adoption is you can have like quick job aids up there, and we've also developed some job aids that we've partnered with Asif on, and it's built into the platform. So things like roles and responsibilities, where to get training, who you should call for help, etc.
Yeah. Now just going through over here and showing folks, this is something that everybody asks, how do you administer all that stuff? Well, you can administer it at the site collection level. If you have the full-blown product, which is Visual SP, that you can do at the farm level, but the Visual SP Express that we're talking about is at the site collection level. And here are all the different items, right? And you go into an item, for example, uploading document to library. You pick the language. It's all supports French and Spanish out of the box, and you can have others too. But then the group that it's going to belong to, the title, description, the actual link to where the video is, or the artifact is, could be anything, and that could be whether it could be in-house in your environment or it could be outside. The exact type of player you want to use to show the content, it could be document, could be an image, could be a YouTube video, could be whatever that you want to show, right? The icon that you want to display. Yeah? Were you saying something?
No, I said absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the scope of exactly where you want to show it to. Publishing page, links list, survey list, task list, etc. You can even have custom scopes. You can use that with the Visual SP web part, which I'll show you in just a second. And then the permissions of exactly who should be looking at the artifact, what type of permissions they have to be able to see it. So and then so that's all from the help tab, and also we ship the Visual SP web part as well, which you can use to show content within the body of the page instead of, or in addition, I should say, to the help. And this could all be custom stuff that you want to show. Basically, being wherever you want to show, whatever you want to show to the user when they need it. The idea, one thing that is extremely important that I think is I don't say it. I think I know for a fact now. End users will not go outside of their way to look for information they need. You can count on that. I've seen this hundreds of times now, so I can say it very confidently. I've seen that that if there's a knowledge portal, it's going to be extremely, it just won't happen, or if it happens, it's going to be once in a while that they'll do that. If you provide them in-context help, then and only then is where they're going to stick to this, they understand it.
And that's nothing negative, because the reality is everybody's busy.
Yeah.
While there's a handful that are proactive, oh, let me go to the Knowledge Center and learn more. But a lot of times it's responsive, reactive, where, oh man, I got to post this. Okay, how do I do that again?
And that's the thing. I don't mean any disrespect, but folks have a lot to do these days. Everybody is doing a lot of stuff. We all, I mean, I know I do have a lot of stuff as an end user of the stuff that I do. You do as well, I'm sure, Doug. And it's difficult to go out of your way to find information what you're looking for. But if it's provided right there, it's easy to just click on it, understand it, and you move on your way.
Absolutely. So thank you, Asif.
Got it.
Yeah. Let me, can you give me the screen
Yeah,
back?
I'm giving right now. There we go.
So, very good. Thank you. So, so when you think about support model as you build your sustainable adoption plan, it's very important that you have a ways for end users to help themselves. So that's the first step. And Visual ASP, as a part of SSAF, is allows for your organization to have that. The second level is your site manager. So obviously, part of the structure and part of governance is ideally whoever owns whoever owns or manages the site would be responsible for helping the people in that site. And then third, IT ideally would address higher level support. So if things break or error or more complex solution building. But again, get away from the straight to IT support, and you've seen this, simple things sometimes, and it's to nobody's fault. They're just new to this tool. They call IT or fill a ticket request. How do I upload again? So so you want to address all of that. So after you have, you look at what you've got with your SharePoint resources, your champions, you set up your support model. Now it's time to build contextual user training. And what the idea here is, even if it's not a brand new implementation like Asif was describing earlier, a good time to put together a sustainable adoption program is when you're doing an upgrade, because it could be in the guise of, well, as a part of this upgrade, we're going to do all these things. And when I say contextual user training, it has to be very relevant to the user. So for example, my rule of thumb for site manager training, no more than 4 hours. That's it. For business user training, no more than 2 hours, right? And it's very important that you're not thinking all they'll get around learning SharePoint is just from this training. That's why we had to put together all that stuff early on, because past the training, we have to have these resources that can empower and assist your community of users. From a site manager perspective, when you train them, talk about what SharePoint is being used for in the organization, but more importantly, their role and responsibility, and this is the governance part. Nobody's going to read the big, thick governance document, but if you give them 5 bullet points, okay, if you're a site manager, if you're a site creator, these are the 5 things you're responsible for. That's it, right? And from a business user perspective, contextual training means, and I'm not saying this is the definitive answer, but at least in my experience and how I've helped customers, is contextual training is really looking at their pain points and how SharePoint can help their day-to-day needs. So for example, one of the customers I'm working with is we're building end-user training for their new upgrade. The training is about how we can improve meetings, how we can accelerate project collaboration, how you can better communicate and coordinate with your teams internationally. So really, it's a shift, right? It's not like how to create a site, how to create a list, how to create a library. Well, we're going to teach all that, but it's you turn it around to say, hey, look, these are all your pains, and guess what? We can fix that with Outlook, SharePoint, Excel, what have you. So it's turning the view around addressing business needs. Once you put your plan together, your sustainable adoption plan, you go and execute. So step 4 is now you want to establish buy-in organization-wide. And the first step to do this is really get people excited. You want to launch your sustainable adoption campaign. And this is where corporate communications and HR can help you. One, you want to promote it. You want to drive interest and excitement. So here's a great video later on you could go and watch from a company called Van City. They produce a little commercial. internally about their new intranet and why you should get excited about it. So that's really good. And then as a call to action with your launch is, okay, there's these training coming up or there's these activities coming up, so all that communication has to go out.
I had a couple of
Now
examples that are out there too on that
go ahead.
launch. So one thing I've heard is having a birth announcement. You know how you put in a birth announcement on your lawn? Well, you put a birth announcement out there somewhere saying, hey, look, this new portal has been born. And you don't have to call it SharePoint portal. You can call it whatever your company name is. Give it a nice, unique, catchy name. And just say, this is born.
Actually, that's a great point, Asif, because SharePoint is a Swiss Army knife. You can do 10,000 things, right? I mean, back in the days when we had our first intranet built in HTML and Perl, we didn't walk around the office and say, hey, where's that HR policy manual? It's in the Perl. It's in the HTML. We never said that. We said it's in the intranet, right? Or it's in, our company portal. And I think that's important, too, with your organization. If you can customize it, call it to whatever it's intended for. Oh, it's in the HR onboarding system. You're not going to hide the fact that it's using SharePoint, but call it as to what it's intended for.
Exactly.
Then deliver the training. And one of the key recommendations I have is you make it as engaging as you can. Now, if possible, face-to-face instructor-led, that's the ideal scenario, but I know that's not realistic, especially large organizations. You could do a link, like a web-based thing just like this, record it, and while it's short, so this is the big thing, I know this is a big shift in what you're used to, give homework, right? So for example, this one organization I'm working with, we're about to embark on their sustainable adoption program. We're about to roll out the training. The end user training is 2 hours, but towards the end of that, there's going to be homework. And what we're going to do is it's going to be team-based. Different departments would be building their little project. And then the culmination of all this is a SharePoint idle activity. So it's a lunch and learn. So based on what they've learned, they're going to go off and build whatever, and it's easy enough. And they have all the resources to learn more. So we don't expect them to remember everything they hear in the training, but now we have Visual SP, we have all the different resources out there. They can go out and look at tips and tricks and build on this project as a team. Because 3 weeks after the training, they're going to do a show and tell. And in this show and tell, there's going to be judges, and this is what we call SharePoint Idle, is through your SharePoint Lunch and Learn. And then whoever wins in this organization, check this out, Asif, everybody in that team will get a free day off.
Ooh, nice.
Talk about motivation and excitement, right? Now, again, some of you may be raising your eyebrows. Not going to happen here. I'm not saying you give everybody a day off. But my point is you have to be very creative and think about what can excite, motivate, and drive people. Because part of that whole activity of building something that's relevant to them, guess what? That's where the learning actually happens. Learning doesn't happen during the 2-hour training. I mean, they'll get a brain dump of what they can do and how to solve some of their problems, but when they actually do it, that's when learning happens.
Exactly.
And when the light bulbs start flashing and say, oh man, I could do this for this other thing I'm having trouble with, that's where adoption starts kicking in. Step 4. So step 4 is, or actually step 5 now, is you want to maintain that engagement. So again, step 1, we get the decision makers on board. Step 2, we align business needs. Step 3, we build a sustainable adoption plan. Step 4, we execute the plan. But step 5, you want to sustain it, right? Because once you get people excited, okay, what happens after that? We've seen it, Ducks. We got people excited, and then suddenly it just died down through time. Because you have to have, in my experience, at least a 12-month engagement plan. So past the initial, launch and training, how do you get people incentivized? So you got to constantly facilitate engagement. One of the things you have to do is you got to create incentive programs. So as an example, in one organization we work with is we put together a knowledge management portal where the community of users can share best practices, share what they've learned, and help each other out. And in this specific organization, whoever answered the most correct questions, they'll get like likes and stars, and whoever scores the most points, every month they can cash those in and get little prizes that IT gives out, right? And sometimes USB drive, but it's the idea of gamification. Again, not only they're helping other people, but they get rewarded for it. But also they get to learn stuff too. So start thinking about those incentive programs. And again, having the self-service FAQ, Visual SP, right there helping them whenever they need it is very, very important. To facilitate engagement, you have to have regular adoption activities. So IT working with corporate communications can host user groups, internal user group, lunch and learns, maybe some tip of the week, or regular drives that you showcase what other groups have done. Again, you could do all this virtually. And you can, there's a lot of ways to do this, and some of you may be thinking, well, docs, this might cost a lot of money. No, not necessarily. That's why you got to look at what corporate communications is doing, because they have a lot of these programs in place already. It's just weaving in on pushing better adoption around SharePoint. So again, typically this, you got to have a plan for 12 months for a full shift and full change to happen. Constantly coach and mentor people. You got to constantly grow your SharePoint champions, engage site managers. So as IT, for example, have regular meetings with these site managers, understand what they're seeing and pain points, and how you can better help them grow the usage in the with site managers and admin types. What tips and techniques have you seen worked? You there, Asif?
I'm sorry. Once again, it got cut off a little bit. Sorry about that. I'm sorry. What was it?
No. I was asking. I know you work a lot with site managers, site admins. What are some of the tips and tricks that you can share to help motivate them and continue to mentor them to grow not only the usage of SharePoint, but empower them to help their users as well?
Well, that, the famous saying of if you give a man a fish, they'll live one, they'll have a day. But if you tease them to fish, they'll live happily ever after. Basically, they'll have food to eat forever. That is exactly what you want to do with this thing as well. If you keep on answering questions when they come in as to here's how you do it, or you show them exactly how to do it, there'll be more questions and similar questions. However, if you teach them how, here's how to do it, and here I'm going to show you how to do it, and you do it instead of me doing it. That's one thing. Or even better, sometimes you go ahead and make a recording, a few screenshots, a quick document of something that's coming in a lot, post it somewhere, and send them there for them to have the self-service experience. So once people get used to it, they'll know exactly where to go and how to help themselves. And that is good for everybody, for the company, for the site managers, and for the end users in the long run. They might not see it right away, but in the long run, they'll definitely appreciate that.
Well, good. Boy, man, time flies. But what do you guys think? Any just quick feedback? You can type in the chat room. What do you guys think so far? So we only have so much time to share, but hopefully these 5 steps kind of help you think about more and how to do this in your organization. And like what you described earlier, Asif and I, we put together the Sustainable SharePoint Adoption Foundation offering. We can certainly would love to work with you guys on this. And Asif, you have and really you're getting 3 things. Number 1, I'll help facilitate a workshop on-site or remotely with your company to put together a sustainable adoption plan for your organization, help you come up with a plan and the roadmap, and then we'll also put in Visual SP Express, a special version of it, in your organization as well. Any other thing you want to add on to that, Asif?
Yeah, well, just a quick explanation. Visual SP Express is just like the big product, but it's controlled at the site collection level. Visual SP, the full-blown product, which is on our site, you can just go to visualsp.com and you'll see more information about it, visualsp.com. And that is basically at the farm level you can control all the content. So that's the major difference. And um, we covered a lot of ground in this call, of course, in this session. There's a lot more, hopefully, that Dux and I will be talking about later as well. We want to help. We're here to help. One thing that I want to ask everybody, let's see what people say, is can you honestly say at this point, anybody, I would love to hear yes, actually, if possible, that your users get it. Your users get your strategy and they're on board with it. Because I would love to share some ideas and thoughts with you specifically as well on that thing. That's something that's been very difficult. What do you guys think about that? Now, I'm hearing, probably look at that as well. Doug's not here. See, nope, no, no. Okay, so lots of no's coming in. And that's usually the case, unfortunately. It doesn't matter if it's SharePoint 2001 or 3 or 2007, 2010, 2013. This happens a lot. You get small successes, but you don't get the sustainable successes. And that's the big thing that Doug's pointed out as well before. It's not just SharePoint adoption, it's sustainable SharePoint adoption. Let's look at the entire strategy, because making nice bells and whistles and all that stuff doesn't really cut it, not for the end users. The end users, you're talking about biologists, you're talking about paralegals, you're talking about doctors also. My doctor has SharePoint now. And, those folks care about getting the job done and serving their client. Client could be their boss, could be the actual end, some customer. And let's speak their language. Anyway, that's right.
So I got a couple great questions. I'm going to go through the list here, Asif, and you can look at these questions too. Will this event be recorded? Yes. So if you attended, we'll send you the recording. Is Visual SP out for 2013? The answer is yes, correct? Yep. Asif? Is it available for O365? Yeah. The demo version is, but go ahead, Asif.
Yeah, I actually answered that to a few people who asked that on the QA. Office 365, it's been available as an app since October, the Visual SP app. But things keep on changing in the cloud, as you guys probably know. So it's been hard to keep up with Microsoft as they change things around so much. But we're going to have a nice stable version we're targeting for next few months, actually. But right now, it's not an Office 365 app. Can you have artifacts and stuff that you can serve through Office 365? Sure, you can. Absolutely. We can definitely provide you that. But it's not really an app. I mean, there's an app, like I said, but it's not a production app yet.
Good. But certainly the on-premise version, it's available already.
Oh, yeah. We've had it available before.
Do you have links to the spreadsheets you collect to prioritize? Absolutely. So part of what we'll send you after this session is not only the videos, but the templates I showed you. Everybody will get a copy of that.
And regarding the recorded video, by the way, so everybody's going to get a link, whoever registered for this webinar, and in that link is going to take you directly to the streaming version of the whole webinar.
Yeah, we'll take one more question in the interest of time. So, Lynn, on your website, there's no mention of the Express version. How can I secure that? So that's a great question. Visual XP Express is only available through the Sustainable SharePoint Adoption Foundation program. So that's not available separately. Asif, you might want to add more to that.
Right. I don't know how much you want to talk about pricing right now, Dux. You can actually if you want to talk about that. But Visual XP Express is part of SSAF, which is a collaboration effort of Innovative E and SharePoint Videos. Did you want to talk about the price or anything, Dux?
Yeah, so from a pricing perspective, typically that package, that solution costs $13,500, but we're running a special for the month of June, especially for those that attended. And we'll send you more information about this too. If you're interested to get SharePoint Sustainable Adoption Foundation in your organization, again, which means I'll spend one day with you guys, put together a Sustainable Adoption plan, help you build your roadmap, and then we'll put Visual SP Express for you. We have a $99.50 special for this month only, so till June 30th, and we'll send you that information as well.
Absolutely. The stuff that you see on the site, I just wanted to quickly mention that, if people are looking at, hey, what does exactly Visual SP look like, Visual SP Express, you can go on the site, like I said, visualsp.com, and check out the visuals. The visuals do remain exactly the same.
Yep.
Go ahead, Doug.
No, so I've enjoyed this, Asif. We should do more joint presentation.
Absolutely. And any feedback you guys have also on our joint presentation, always, always welcome. So let us know what we have done good, what we really need to improve on. That, especially that, I think I'm always looking for that personally. I'm sure you are too, Doug, as a presenter.
Yep. So with that, thank you, gang, for coming, and then we look forward to continuing the conversation. So hit us up on our email or Twitter